8 years ago, my parents were running this small, old-school restaurant that had been in our family for 2 generations. They constantly talked about how it would be passed down, like a sacred heirloom, to one of us kids to keep the legacy alive. But even back then, it was obvious who they had in mind: my older brother, Clark. He was always the favorite. No matter what he did, they found a way to praise him. Meanwhile, I was stuck living in his shadow, always being told to be more like him, to push harder, to live up to the Clark standard. Right after my high school graduation, they sat me down for what they called a serious talk. They said I'd be starting full-time at the restaurant immediately so I could learn the business from the ground up. The end goal, according to them, was for Clark to take over as the main owner one day. As for me? If I proved myself worthy, I might get a small stake in it. Maybe. But here's the thing, I already had my own plan. I'd been accepted into a solid university with a partial scholarship, and I wanted to study computer science. Tech was my passion. I'd been coding and building little programs since middle school, teaching myself everything I could about computers in my free time. I wasn't trying to escape the family, I just wanted something different. My parents didn't see it that way. They said college was a complete waste of money and time, and they insisted the restaurant was all I'd ever need to build a good life. They called me selfish for wanting to walk away from something that had supposedly kept our family afloat for decades. Clark, by the way, had dropped out of community college after just one semester. He'd been working at the restaurant for 3 years by then, and my parents acted like he was some kind of business prodigy. They praised his people skills, his natural leadership, his work ethic. It was like they were blind to the fact that he'd given up on higher education entirely. I tried to compromise. I told them I'd work at the restaurant during summers and breaks, but I wanted to build a future of my own. I didn't want to be the guy who spent his whole life working under his older brother's thumb. That didn't go over well. My dad exploded. He called me ungrateful and accused me of turning my back on the family. According to him, Clark had proven his loyalty, while I was just trying to run from my responsibilities. What followed were some of the ugliest weeks of my life. Non-stop arguments, guilt-tripping, and emotional blackmail. My parents kept throwing in my face how much they had sacrificed for me, how much money they spent raising me, and said working in the restaurant was the least I could do to pay them back. Clark, of course, chimed in with his usual wisdom, telling me I was being an idiot, that college was full of nonsense, and that I'd never make as much money as I could sticking with family. The only person who had my back during that time was my girlfriend. She encouraged me to follow my dreams and go to college. Naturally, my parents blamed her, claiming she was driving a wedge between me and the family. When I finally stood my ground and told them I was going to college no matter what, they dropped the hammer. They said if I left, I might as well never come back. In their words, I'd be dead to them. I figured they were bluffing, just trying to scare me. But after my graduation party, I came home to find all my stuff boxed up and left out on the porch. My dad handed me an envelope with $500 inside and told me, straight to my face, that it was all I was ever getting from them. I wasn't their son anymore, and I wasn't welcome in their house. That night, I moved in with my girlfriend's family. They took me in without hesitation. A few months later, I left for college. To make ends meet, I worked 2 part-time jobs while keeping up with classes. My scholarship helped, but it didn't cover everything. My parents had blocked me on everything: calls, texts, social media. I even tried stopping by during winter break, thinking maybe things had cooled off. But when I knocked on the door, my dad told me, without even opening it, that if I didn't leave, he'd call the cops. Clark, on the other hand, kept up his picture-perfect act online. He'd post photos of holiday dinners, family vacations, birthday parties, always with captions like "grateful for my real family" or "spending time with the ones who matter." It felt like every post was a jab straight at me. College wasn't easy. Between school, work, and no support system, I was constantly exhausted. But I made it. I graduated with a computer science degree and got a job at a tech firm not long after. I worked my ass off and slowly climbed the ladder, from junior developer to senior, then to team lead. Eventually, I was making good money, bought a car, then my own place. I was finally living the life I'd fought so hard to build. A few years ago, I met Rose. We clicked almost immediately. She's a nurse, and one of the most grounded, supportive people I've ever met. We've been living together for a year now, and she likes to post pictures of our life, vacations, date nights, home renovations, that kind of thing. Just everyday happiness. Not long ago, I heard through the grapevine via a distant relative that the restaurant was tanking. Apparently, Clark had picked up a gambling habit and had been skimming money from the business to cover his losses. My parents were drowning in debt, struggling just to keep the place running. I didn't reach out. Why would I? They'd made their feelings clear years ago, and I'd made peace with that. Or at least I thought I had. Then, about a month ago, Rose posted some vacation pictures from our trip to Hawaii. She tagged me, shared shots of the new car, and the home renovations we'd finished. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, there was a loud knock on the door. I looked through the peephole and froze. It was my parents. My mom had a plate of cookies in her hands, and my dad was holding a bouquet of flowers. They both looked older, tired, worn down in a way I hadn't expected. I didn't open the door. I spoke through it and told them to leave. I reminded them that 8 years ago, they told me I wasn't their son anymore. They needed to respect that. My mom started crying. She said they'd made a huge mistake, that they wanted to make things right, that they missed me and wanted me back in their lives. My dad said he'd seen how well I was doing, how proud they were of me, and how they just wanted to celebrate everything I'd accomplished. I didn't budge. I told them you don't get to kick someone out of your life and come crawling back when things fall apart. I warned them again to leave, or I'd call the police. But they didn't go. They kept knocking. My mom was sobbing, begging me to open the door, saying she couldn't go another day without seeing her son. Then my dad got to the real reason they were there. The restaurant was failing. They were out of money. He said we could fix it together as a family. That we could rebuild it, with me at the helm. And that's when it all clicked. They didn't come because they missed me. They came because they saw what I'd built without them, and they wanted a piece of it. So I called the cops. I told them my parents were trespassing and refusing to leave even after I asked them multiple times. An officer arrived within 15 minutes. He spoke with my parents, told them they had to leave, and not to come back unless I invited them. Even then, my mom was still crying, begging the officer to let her talk to me. My dad was arguing, saying I was their son and they had every right to see me. But they were finally told to leave. And that's how it went. The officer told them flat out that I was an adult and had every legal right to decide who was or wasn't allowed on my property. If they came back without my permission, they could be arrested for trespassing. Before leaving, he gave me a report number and told me to call again if they showed up. He also mentioned that if the situation kept escalating, I could file for a restraining order. Update 1. 3 days after the police escorted my parents off my property, my brother Clark and his wife Iris showed up at my door. Yeah, he got married sometime during those 8 years, and of course, I wasn't invited. Rose and I were in the middle of dinner when the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole and saw them both standing there. Clark looked anxious, like he couldn't stop fidgeting, running his hands through his hair. Iris was standing a few feet behind him, arms crossed, looking more annoyed than supportive. I cracked the door open but kept the security chain latched. I asked what they wanted. Clark said they just wanted a few minutes to talk, something about the situation with our parents. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him straight up that I didn't want to talk about them. I reminded him I made my boundaries very clear when I called the cops and that they needed to leave. That's when Iris leaned forward and jumped in. She said my parents were devastated, that they hadn't eaten or slept properly since the police incident, and they couldn't understand why I was being so cruel. Clark added that they sent him because maybe I'd listened to him as brothers and that he wanted to help fix the family. I told him the family broke the day our parents packed up my life in boxes and tossed me out like I was nothing. That door was closed the second they chose loyalty to a restaurant over their own son. Now that things were falling apart financially, they suddenly wanted to rebuild. That wasn't family, it was desperation. Clark's face turned red. He told me I was being selfish and that I should help, no matter what had happened in the past. According to him, our parents admitted they were wrong and were ready to make amends. Iris chimed in again, talking about how they were getting older, and that one day I'd regret cutting them off. She said I was throwing away the only family I had over what she called a silly argument. I started to close the door, and that's when Clark shoved his hand against it. He said I owed it to our parents to at least listen, to give them the chance to apologize. I told him to back off my door and that I didn't owe anyone a damn thing. They made their choice. I just finally respected it. That's when Clark snapped. He started yelling, calling me a spoiled brat, accusing me of thinking I was better than everyone else. He said our parents were right to favor him because at least he cared about family. At that point, Rose came to the door. She told them to leave immediately, that they were disturbing the neighborhood. Clark turned on her and told her to stay out of it, that this was a family matter. Rose didn't even flinch. She said I was her family now, and she wasn't going to stand by while they harassed me in our own home. She warned them that if they didn't leave, she'd call the police again. Iris tugged on Clark's arm, trying to get him to step back, but he shook her off and kept yelling. He went on and on about how our parents had given up everything for us, how the restaurant was in trouble because of a few mistakes he'd made, and how we could fix it together if I just stepped in. According to him, I had plenty of money to spare and was just being selfish. I told him flatly that his gambling addiction wasn't my problem. I wasn't going to bail out a business that was never intended for me in the first place. Our parents had made it very clear that the restaurant belonged to him, not me. Clark snapped that I was lying. He insisted that the plan had always been for both of us to run it together, and that I ruined everything when I decided to leave for college. The yelling escalated. He was standing right there in the doorway, refusing to move. Iris kept trying to calm him down, but he wasn't listening. He kept shouting about how I'd abandoned the family and how our parents were now suffering because of my coldness. I told him they were suffering because their golden child had stolen from their business to fund his addiction. Instead of trying to drag me back into their mess, maybe they should be focused on getting him some actual help. That hit a nerve. Clark's face twisted in frustration. He yelled that his gambling wasn't that bad, that he just made a few dumb decisions. But then, of course, he said the real issue was me, that I broke our parents' hearts by leaving. Rose stepped between us again. She told him it was time to go and that she was calling the police right now. Clark puffed up and barked that he wasn't afraid of the cops, that he had every right to speak to his brother. I told him he didn't have a brother anymore. That stopped him cold. He just stood there for a second, then started crying. He said he never wanted our parents to cut me off and that he had tried to get them to bring me back into the fold, but they were too stubborn to admit they were wrong. I looked him straight in the eye and told him he never lifted a finger to help me. Instead, he went online posting about how thankful he was for his real family, like I never existed. I told him not to pretend he cared now. Clark tried to defend himself, said those posts weren't about me, that he was just trying to cheer our parents up and always hoped I'd come back someday. Finally, Iris managed to pull him away from the doorway. She said they were leaving, and maybe we could talk again once things had cooled down. As she dragged him down the driveway, Clark kept shouting that I was making a huge mistake, that family was supposed to forgive each other, and that I'd regret this one day. I shut the door and locked it. Rose hugged me and told me she was proud of me for standing my ground and not letting them guilt me into anything. We could still hear Clark yelling in the street for a couple more minutes before Iris finally got him into their car and drove off. Update 2. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of notifications on my phone. A few friends had tagged me in comments, so I went online to see what was going on. And there it was, Clark had posted a long, dramatic rant on his social media about our argument. Iris had even uploaded a video she secretly recorded on her phone while the whole thing was happening. The video showed Clark at my door, yelling about family and begging me to help our parents. Then it cut to me closing the door and Rose telling them to leave. From the way it was edited, it looked like Clark was trying to have a peaceful, heartfelt conversation and that I was the cold, dismissive one. Clark's caption claimed he'd tried reaching out to his estranged brother in a last-ditch effort to reunite the family. He said I refused to even hear him out and had turned heartless since getting rich. He wrote that I'd let money and pride turn me into someone who didn't care about the people who raised me. There were dozens of comments, most from people who didn't know the full story, calling me selfish, saying I should forgive my parents, that I'd regret not helping them in their time of need. Iris's video post had its own caption about how heartbreaking it was to see a family torn apart. She wrote that she just couldn't understand how someone could turn their back on loving parents who only wanted to reconcile and make things right. And just like that, they made it look like I was the villain in my own story. You couldn't hear most of what was said in the video because it was filmed from outside, and the audio quality was awful. But even with the muffled sound, it still managed to make me look like the bad guy. I was furious, not just about the video itself, but the fact that they recorded our private conversation without my knowledge and then threw it online to publicly shame me. They were the ones who showed up uninvited, refused to leave when I asked, and now they were painting me as heartless? Rose was just as angry, if not more. She said Iris had no right to record anything, let alone share it publicly without our consent, and that we should report the video for violating our privacy. I didn't want to start some dramatic back and forth online, but it pissed me off that people who didn't know the full story were now judging me based on a one-sided, misleading clip. Then my college buddy Sam saw the post and stepped in. He left a public comment asking why Clark conveniently left out the part where our parents disowned me and threw me out of the house when I told them I wanted to go to college. Sam pointed out how they blocked my number for nearly a decade and only started trying to reach me again when their business went downhill. According to him, and rightly so, they weren't looking to make peace. They were hoping I'd be their financial safety net. Other friends of mine started chiming in, sharing their own experiences about being cut off by family only to be contacted again when money or support was needed. They all said the same thing: I was doing the right thing by setting boundaries and not letting guilt or pressure suck me back in. The comments section exploded into a full-on war. My friends were defending me, while Clark's friends and a bunch of people who barely knew us started saying stuff like family is everything and you should always forgive blood. It became this huge back and forth between people who understood why I was standing firm and others who thought I was just being bitter. Clark started replying to people directly, trying to justify himself. He claimed everyone was misunderstanding the situation, and that I was lying about how things really happened 8 years ago. According to him, our parents never truly disowned me, I just walked out and refused to come back. The more people pushed back, the more defensive he got. Eventually, he started deleting comments and blocking anyone who disagreed with him. Iris stopped responding altogether once people started pointing out that she'd only been married to Clark for less than 2 years and wasn't around back when all this originally went down. The post itself started getting shared more widely, and the comments section became a disaster. Supporters, critics, random strangers, all shouting over each other. By that afternoon, Clark had taken the entire thing down, the post, the video, everything. Too many people had called him out on his lies and half-truths, and I think the embarrassment finally caught up with him. Later that evening, he sent me a private message. He said he never meant for it to spiral out of control, that he only wanted to help our parents, and that he was sorry for dragging it onto social media in the first place. I didn't respond. I didn't want to encourage any more communication, and honestly, I was still too angry. He tried to humiliate me publicly and manipulate the narrative. That kind of betrayal doesn't just disappear with a half apology. Update 3. 2 days after Clark deleted the post, my mom somehow got in touch with me at work. She managed to get transferred to my direct line, even though I had never once shared my work info with anyone in my family. I was right in the middle of a meeting when my phone rang. As soon as I said hello, I heard her crying. She told me she found my number on the company website and that she was sorry to contact me like that, but she needed to talk about Clark's post. She claimed that neither she nor my dad knew Clark was going to share anything online, and that they were both embarrassed and upset about it. According to her, Clark only told them about the post after my friends started commenting and pushing back. She said my dad had been furious with him for making things worse and for trying to manipulate people into taking sides. She also said they had told Clark and Iris to stop reaching out to me, and that they regretted sending them to my house in the first place. I cut her off and told her I was at work, that I couldn't have personal calls during business hours, and that she shouldn't be contacting me this way at all. She said she understood, but that she just wanted me to know they weren't trying to use me or get money from me. She insisted they genuinely missed me and wanted to be part of my life again, and that they realized, too late, that they'd made some horrible mistakes. She told me they had been seeing a counselor and were working on acknowledging the pain they caused. She said they were committed to doing the work to make things right, even if it took years. I told her I wasn't interested. I'd built a life without them, and I didn't need their involvement. I reminded her that the moment they packed up my things and left them on the porch, they lost the right to call themselves my parents. She broke down even more. Through tears, she said she understood why I was angry and that I had every right to be. But she hoped that one day, I'd find it in me to forgive them. She said they weren't asking for money, they weren't asking for help with the restaurant, they just wanted to get to know me again, to be part of the life I had built. I told her if she was serious about respecting me, then she needed to respect my boundaries too. Calling my job was completely out of line, and it could have gotten me in serious trouble. She apologized for that and said she didn't know how else to reach me since I had blocked their numbers. I didn't say anything after that. I just hung up the phone. She said she was desperate to fix things between us, but I cut her off. I reminded her that I'd blocked everyone's numbers for a reason, and I didn't want to be contacted by anyone. I made it clear that if they kept trying to reach me, I wouldn't hesitate to file for a restraining order. There was a long pause. Then, in a quieter voice, she said she didn't want it to come to that. She promised she'd talk to my dad and Clark, and that she'd tell them to leave me alone and stop trying to reach out. I didn't let up. I told her I wasn't bluffing. I'd already filed a police report after they showed up uninvited at my house, and I had all the documentation I needed to prove harassment. A judge wouldn't think twice about granting a restraining order. She said she understood. That she'd make sure everyone in the family got the message, that no one would contact me again, even though it was apparently breaking their hearts. I told her I had to get back to work and that this would be the last time I ever took a call from any of them. If anyone tried to reach out again, I'd file the paperwork immediately, and they'd be arrested for violating the order. Before she hung up, she told me she loved me. That she'd always love me, even if she never got to see me again. After the call ended, I just sat there, shaking. I hadn't heard my mom speak to me with that kind of calm or softness in over 8 years. It brought back a flood of memories I didn't ask for and honestly, didn't want. Once I pulled myself together, I went to my boss and explained everything. I told him there was a chance my family might try calling the office again, and that I'd really appreciate it if any personal calls could be screened. He was understanding and said HR could help set up a system for that. He also told me to let them know right away if anyone tried showing up at the office. I wasn't taking chances. I met with building security and gave them recent photos of my parents, Clark and Iris. I made it clear they were not to be let into the building under any circumstances. The next day, I decided to take it a step further and went to the courthouse to learn more about filing a restraining order. The clerk gave me all the forms, explained how it works, and told me that based on what I described, unwanted visits, calls to my job, repeated harassment, I'd almost certainly qualify for a temporary order. She said the temporary one would be approved on the spot, and then a judge would schedule a hearing to decide whether it should become permanent. I filled out the forms right there at the courthouse but didn't turn them in yet. Part of me still wanted to give them one final chance to respect my boundaries. Later that day, I sent a text to my mom using a number she wouldn't recognize. I told her I'd been to the courthouse. I'd filled out the restraining order paperwork and it was ready to file. I made it absolutely clear if anyone from the family reached out again, I wouldn't hesitate to submit it. This was their last warning. Within an hour, she replied. She said she'd spoken to my dad, Clark, and Iris, and they all agreed to back off completely. No more messages, no more visits, no more attempts to contact me. She said they'd also tell any extended family or mutual friends not to reach out on their behalf. According to her, they'd finally accepted my decision even if it hurt and wouldn't pressure me anymore. She wrote that she hoped maybe, one day in the future, I'd change my mind, but that they would wait quietly and without interference. She ended the message by saying she was proud of who I'd become and sorry for all the pain they'd caused. I didn't reply. I didn't want to open the door to more conversation. But for the first time, I felt some peace. It seemed like they finally understood I wasn't playing around, that I was serious about cutting ties. It's been 3 weeks since that phone call, and so far, none of them have reached out. I haven't seen any new posts about me, no cryptic messages, no guilt-tripping from relatives. Just silence. I still have the restraining order paperwork tucked away, ready to file if anything changes. But for now, they seem to be respecting my boundaries. Rose and I have even started talking about maybe moving to a new city in a year or two, just a clean slate, somewhere fresh where my past can't find me. But until then, things have been quiet, and honestly, that's all I ever wanted. I don't need an apology tour or some emotional reunion. I just need space, peace, distance. And finally, it feels like I might be getting it.